Hi, my name is John. I'm part of the DriveHUD team, and in this video we're going to go over how to create an R&D from scratch and exactly what the R&D report is and what it can do. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So if you click on the R&D tab in DriveHUD 2, you'll be brought to a screen that'll come up with a bunch of blank data. This is no data to plot. On your left-hand side here, you'll see a bunch of built-in R&D reports. There's different ones for cash and tournament games. And I'm going to walk you through how to create your own and what the R&D report can do. So first of all, R&D is basically a new way to visualize and analyze data that's not otherwise easy to do. So this is combining a lot of chart and graph data along with hand and analysis data, and I'm going to show you why that is super powerful and what you can do with it and how you can build these reports for yourself in any kind of scenario. Basically, you're just limited by your imagination in terms of what you can do and what you can create in an analysis point here. So for purposes of this tutorial video, I'm going to create from scratch an R&D that's going to look at a scenario where you 3-bet pre-flop and you did not c-bet the flop, and then you bet the turn. And we're going to be looking at and trying to basically analyze what bet sizes were most effective in reaching a one pot scenario. So we're going to look at success rate of c-betting. So this is essentially also called a delayed c-bet and a 3-bet pot. So that's a scenario I'm going to set up. I'm going to set this up for cash games, and it's very easy to set up a R&D for a cash game and then duplicate it for a tournament or vice versa. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and we're going to create a couple of widgets that will go along with this, so it'll make our analysis a little bit easier. And then I'm going to show you, after I go through all of this from scratch, I'm going to show you a way to do this as kind of a cheat where you can just take an existing R&D, rename it, use some of the functions that are in it, and just add some of your own filters to modify it and make it more appropriate for what you're trying to do. So let's go ahead. I'm going to jump right into that now. Once you have the R&D screen loaded up here from the R&D tab, it's going to go over to the drop-down menu, select Create New R&D. Then you're going to get this context menu here on the left-hand side. If you can, view the video and follow along. That's kind of ideal, but I'm just going to go through. I'm going to go step by step each of these areas, and we're going to fill this out. So we're going to be doing delayed c-bet and a 3-bet pot, and this is going to be for cash games. And the next section here is graph type. You can change this at any time. I like spline area. There's a few different kinds. You can play around with what you like the best there, but they're essentially just how the data is displayed. So you have step line, step area. It's whether the area is going to be filled in or line or just point analysis, whatever you feel like is appropriate. I'm choosing spline area. The x-axis stat is going to be bet sizes. So we'll just select, and you can start typing here, and there's several different ones. These ones at the very top are pre-programmed to kind of help when you're entering ranges to make it a little bit easier, but there's a whole assortment of different stats you can set this for. This is bet size as percentage of the pot. Next, we're going to add a range here. So we're going to go 0 to 25% of the pot. We're going to add another range. We're going to say 25.1% to 33%. And I'm going to skip through this real quick so you don't have to watch me type all these. So I have all my ranges typed in here, and this is the maximum number of ranges that you can have for an x-axis right now, which is 9. So just keep that in mind. And now we're going to set our y-axis, and like we said, we wanted to do success rate. So we want to see how successful we were when we did this bet. So right here at the top, and this is the label that you'll see on your y and x axis. So we want to make sure we set that as well. And you can select what color you want. And again, we're doing this for cache games. And now we have to set the filters for this scenario, which is one of the most important parts. So click this plus here. This will bring up our filter screen. So we're going to want to set up that we 3-bet as a yes. And just to be on the safe side, make sure cover all scenarios, I'm going to set cbet as off, which is red. Cbet equals no. And we're going to set saw turn as yes. And then we need to set the delayed cbet. There's a few different ways we can do this. You can do it through hand actions. There is a quick filter for it in this case, so I'm just going to select that delayed cbet as yes. So we have 3-bet, and this applies pre-flop. We did not cbet, saw the turn, and we did delayed cbet. So just click apply. You'll see those filters line up down here, and you can remove these or add them as you see fit. So if you're programming this in and you're trying to set up a scenario and it doesn't come out exactly how you want, you can always go back in and edit and change these. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So now, as we can see, we have one line of data that gives us some interesting feedback. We can look immediately and can see right around half pot size is where we're getting the most success with our delayed turn bets and our 3-bet pots. And as we scale up into pot size, the results seem to get worse and worse, and not a huge sample size in this particular situation. But, and always consider sample size when you're looking at any data and analyzing it, of course. But enough just to kind of give us a little brief cursory here. This database, I think, only has about 20,000 hands. So if you have several 100,000 hands, your data is going to become more and more relevant, of course. So once you have these up, you can click on any of these data points and it'll populate the hands here related to your data that you're looking at. So we're looking at all hands where a scenario happened, and we bet a third to roughly half the pot size, and we can replay these hands, calculate them in the equity calculator, export them. We can narrow this down by being in position and out of position as well. And like I said, this is interesting, but it gets more interesting as you layer some more data. So we're going to add another y-axis point so we can overlay this, and we can see where there's some cross-intersectionality and see if we can pull out some more interesting information to make this a little more precise and have us get a better understanding of how these bet sizes actually affect our win rates. Okay, so to layer this data, we're going to add another y-axis point. And we just do this by clicking the plus up here. And we're going to add net 1. Oops. Net 1. And I'm going to add that label. And we'll keep it green for now. Click Save. And now we'll get a redraw of this data overlapping how much we've won and also our success. So we can see really it looks like around half pot size and closer to 3/4 pot size is where our two strategies are netting us the highest results. So in this case, if you're looking at your overall strategy, and you're checking a lot of flops and 3-bet pots, looking to either kind of bet on the smaller size and or bet on the larger size, either 3/4 or full size, or even overbet the turn, you can quickly kind of break down this data and see how your strategy is actually what kind of results it's yielding in the real world, because a lot of times it's breaking down this and looking at GTO analysis and what are some of the ideal ranges in these scenarios, also seeing the data as it is actually being applied to your player pool, and the results you're getting are hugely important because you want to make sure that they're reacting the way that you expect them to. There's theory and then the reality of what's occurring in your game, so you want to make sure those are overlapping so that you're yielding the best results for yourself. So here I'm not going to comment on what this picture looks like, but you can continue to add more layers here. And if you want to go back and edit any of these, whether it's the color of the line or just change the stat or add more, you just right click. You can also hide or show these again by right clicking, and you can right click and remove them. So now we have that. That's kind of interesting. Now we're going to also add some quick widgets so that we can go through and we can analyze this even further. We're going to add one that looks at hand strength, probably flop texture, maybe position, and we'll add a couple of those right now. I'll show you how you do that. So I'm going to create a new widget, and to do that I just click the plus that's down here. Your widgets will show up right along this axis here under your graph. The great thing about widgets is you can create as many of them as you want. You can create 20 or 30 per R&D, and the advantage here is that it'll allow you to cycle through lots of specific kinds of data very quickly by just clicking on them. It's kind of like adding advanced filters on top of filters with just a single click. So with the R&Ds, there's a number of pre-built ones that are in here, and they are available from this name section. So if you select any of these, it'll auto-populate everything. The advantage there is you can use some of the pre-built ones and you can edit them and modify them as you want, or you can build one from scratch. So if you build it from scratch, you want to name it whatever you want, and then you will build the X and Y axis and the filters and the data and what you want, and then you can save it. And once you create your own and you save it, that will be available in any of the other R&Ds that you create. So you can just select that widget. It'll come up in this list right here once you name it. So if I create, right now we're doing delayed C-bet 3-bet pot. If I do another R&D, and there's this widget that I make right now in this one that I'm creating, I want to add it to another one. I just select it here, it'll show up, and then I can use it throughout the R&D. The other great thing is you can make 2D graphs like we have here with the X and Y axis, and we can also make it more three-dimensional. We can add a Z axis. I'll show you how to do that as we go through this. There's couple different ways, but right now I'm going to start with just one of the predefined ones. We'll go through and I'll show you what each of the options are and how you'd build your own. So I wanted to do hand strength, so I'm going to select it here. Once I select it, it'll auto-populate everything for me. I have so I'll go down here one at a time. The stat to display on the widget is going to be hand strength. So that'll allow us to have those different options in the drop-down, and the style to display that would be a drop-down menu. So the widget will show up and it'll have a drop-down menu like this, and we'll be able to select what these options are that are set here, which again, this auto-populated. We can remove these and add different options if we want for a range. But since we're doing hand strength and I'm just using the defaults, I'm just going to leave it as it is. The data type, you can either have it filtered, means it'll be applying the current filter that you have, that you're set in your R&D, or just overall based on what you're building in this widget. So you can make completely different set of data, or you can build upon your existing filter, which we're going to build upon. We're going to be looking at delayed C-bet 3-bet pot, but now we want to take a look at how hand strength plays out. So again, the X-axis stat is going to be our hand strength, so that's going to show up across here on the bottom. You can put in any stat you want. You can do a search, any stat that's available essentially in your HUD or whatever you'd be able to find. You just type it in. It'll come up here and you can select it. The top ones that are up here have already kind of some predefined areas that'll auto-populate here in the range. So it's just handy just in terms of not having to type in all this stuff every single time. If you want to, like I said, you can remove any of these, just X them. You can add another range. This is the max number of ranges you can have for an R&D. So if we wanted to change one, we could just go in here and select a different one. If we wanted to remove, again, we just click the X. So our Y-axis here, we're going to have net 1. So we're going to look at how much we're winning for each of the ranges in our delayed C-bet 3-bet pot. If I wanted to add a range here, I could. And when I do that, whatever range I add here, I'll automatically get a Z-axis, which I was just talking about. This will create more of a three-dimensional graph. I'll show you what that looks like. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to remove that. Right now we have net 1, no range, and this is the label that will show up here so we know what we're looking at. We can set the color. So I'm just going to click Save. I'll get my widget here. And like I said, then we have our drop-down menu with the different options. So if I want to just look at how I was doing in this spot when I had a pair, I would then click and I get that info. Now if I click on the widget itself, it'll change so that I can see how I'm doing, how much I'm winning in this specific spot with all my different hand ranges. High card, pair, 2-pair, and so on. Oops, I have to change this to all and then click hand strength, and then we'll get all of the data. So it's good that I mess up while I do this so that you can understand. The first option when you do the drop down is always going to be all, and then you can change this to a specific scenario. Once I do that, I'm starting to I'm making the graph more refined. So I gotta make sure that if I click on the overall, I'm making this all my X-axis data. So everything that is contained in here, it'll show up here. If I change it to say pair again, then I'm only looking at pair in this scenario. So of course I'm only going to get one set of data. Okay. The other thing is when you are going through these widgets, if you right click on your graph at any time and you click refresh, this will take you back to the initial graph that we're looking at in our R&D. Again, you can export, you can change how your data and your chart looks with these options. So now I'm going to add one of the 3D ones, and I have one that I already created. So just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to go here, click Save. Now I'm going to have this additional widget that's here. So again, I click on it. Now I'm going to get kind of my 3D modeling when I'm looking now at this delayed C-bet, and I have my flop textures on the bottom, and I have my hand strength here, and then I have how much I'm winning in each of the spots. So I can go through and I can quickly see how I'm doing with my hand strength and the different hand textures, and I can again click on those data points and I'll get my hands right here. So how do you add that third level? You can right click on any of these at any time as you want to modify them and click Edit. Once I add a range to my y-axis, it'll automatically bring up a z-axis stat. So now I can set this to whatever I want, any stat, and then that will layer it on top of my x and y axis data. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to create a widget from scratch so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a new R&D here. Make this super exciting, start from scratch. So if you're creating one from scratch, you need to name it. I'm going to do one we're just going to look at board texture. So what stats do I want to display on this widget? We're going to do board texture. And display type, again, I don't want a number. I want to be able to select different options from a drop down. So I'm going to select drop down. My data type is going to be filter because I want it to be applying this filter up here. And my x-axis is also going to be board texture. This is all part of the x-axis. Now I'm going to add my range. So my board texture, I'm going to say rainbow, and you can start typing these in, and they'll come up in autocomplete, or you can just select them from the drop down here. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to say monotone. I'm going to say, let's see, two-tone. Monotone, two-tone, rainbow, let's say low paired and high paired. There we go. Now my y-axis, I want to put, I'm going to put net 1. Might want to put BB per 100, but I'm going to put net 1. And again, you can always change that. I don't need to add a range in this case. If I wanted to make a third level graph here, I would click arrange, and then I would get a z-axis. I'll do that right now because I can remove it. So you can see I get a z-axis, so I can add that extra label. I don't want to do that for this widget, so I'm going to just remove that. Now I'm going to label what my y-axis is, so I'm going to call it the same thing, net 1. Select my color, green's cool, and click save. Then we'll get the widget added here in our R&D. And then, like I said, we did the drop down, so we can now take a look at this set of data with on a rainbow board. Okay, so we can see what bet sizes are doing on this rainbow board. And if I wanted to combine hand strength, I would say when I only have high card. So in this case, doesn't apply. Let's say when I have a pair. Okay, so there we go. I'll go back to all here. And if I click on it, then I will get on my x-axis here the board textures that we talked about and my total 1 for each of these scenarios. So it's not amazing in this case, but can kind of get an idea of what you can do. At any time, again, you want to go back to the initial R&D, just right click on the graph, click refresh, and you're back at your starting space. So again, this is just kind of an overview, but you can add as many of these widgets for, you can get as creative as you want and dive into lots of different data sets and combine all of these so you have different options that you're looking at, or just set them specific so that you're adding just one layer on top of this existing set of filters. And you can change this again at any time. Any of your y-axis, if you right click again, you can edit and change those, and you can edit, right click, edit, and change your widgets. I would recommend starting with some of the predefined ones, editing those to whatever you want to do, and then saving. And like I said, you can use those widgets and continue to apply them to other R&Ds. So if I went in here, the new one that I just created, board, and I went into c-bedding and single raised pot, and I wanted to add that one that I just created, I just click plus, I go here to my list, I select board and save, and then I'll get that additional widget added that I can take a look at in this particular R&D, which is c-bedding and single raised pot. So I hope that gives you an idea of some of what R&D can do. It's pretty amazing. If you play around with it a lot, you'll see exactly how you can really get into some deep dives in your data. I hope this video tutorial has helped, and as always, if you have any questions, just email support at acepokersolutions.com.